When Richard turned 62, he began to wonder for the first time if he had stopped being a man in the fullest sense of the word. Not because something specific had happened, but because he had simply stopped feeling alive. He had never given much thought to his sexuality. Things had always happened naturally. There had been relationships, attraction, desire. But after retirement, when life slowed down and the days began to blur into one another, something inside him began to dim. At first, he simply stopped thinking about sex. Then he stopped waking up with any sense of energy. Eventually, he noticed his mood often felt gray, and his body somehow no longer felt like his own. He decided it was normal. Just age, he thought. But one day, while listening to a health radio show, he heard a phrase that struck him deeply. Losing sexual connection with yourself isn't aging. It's giving up on life. And suddenly, Richard realized he really was giving up. Not just on sex, but on the experience of himself, on touch, on warmth, on the simple acknowledgement, I'm still alive. I still feel. He remembered how his body used to respond to tenderness, how even slight arousal brought a surge of joy. It wasn't about lust. It was about connection. Sexuality isn't a whim. It's the body's language. Through it, the body says, I matter. I'm still needed. When that language is ignored, the body begins to quiet down. It loses stimulation, turns off its alert systems, slows its internal operations. The heart beats more softly. Muscles weaken. Even the voice changes. Richard had felt all this but couldn't explain it. Until now. Now he knew. He had simply stopped speaking an important language with himself. This subject rarely comes up in homes filled with family photos and the scent of baked apples. It's avoided at dinner tables, ignored in doctors' offices. But as it turned out, this was the key to coming back to life. Because caring for yourself isn't just about pills and blood pressure, it's attention, it's touch, it's recognizing the need for intimacy, even if you live alone and are over 60. Richard started small. He simply allowed himself to think about it without shame, and then to touch himself with kindness, without haste or guilt. That night, for the first time in a long while, he fell asleep with a gentle smile. Not because something had radically changed, but because he had started to care about himself again. When Richard began allowing himself to be closer to his own body, he noticed changes he couldn't explain by external factors alone. His mornings no longer started with a heavy glance in the mirror, but with a light sense of inner presence. At first, he couldn't pinpoint what exactly had shifted. But after a couple of weeks, it became clear. His brain seemed to have woken up. His thoughts were sharper, his mood more stable, and even the usual sluggishness after breakfast had vanished. All of this began after he started paying regular attention to his intimate side. Not out of habit, not out of boredom, but as a way to support himself. Masturbation, as he now understood it, wasn't about sin or shame. It was a way to send the right signals to his body and mind. He discovered that even a simple touch could trigger a whole cascade of biochemical processes. When he did this, without rush and with respect for himself, he noticed how his mood softened, how anxiety eased. It wasn't just a wave of pleasure, it was genuine therapy. He read that during sexual stimulation, the brain releases dopamine, the motivation hormone. It's what gives us the drive to get out of bed, make plans, and feel the zest of life. At the same time, serotonin is released, which stabilizes mood, and oxytocin, the bonding hormone, helps soften the sting of loneliness. And endorphins, the body's natural painkillers, reduce inner tension and stress. All of this is natural biology, nothing artificial. And the body knows how to do it. It just needs to be allowed. Sometimes, in the silence of his bedroom, Richard felt as if his body was saying, "Thank you." It wasn't something shameful or forbidden. On the contrary, there was dignity in those moments. He no longer saw himself as too old for it. He realized that even at 70, the brain needs nourishment, like a flower that needs light. Without that nourishment, it becomes sluggish, dull, apathetic. But with it, it comes alive. Many men over 60 believe that giving up sexual stimulation is just part of aging. But Richard knew the brain interprets that as a signal to slow down life. And the brain follows that signal. On the other hand, even just 1 or 2 moments a week can spark real change. This isn't indulgence. It's a way back to yourself, a way to feel that you're still part of life. Richard had always seen himself as a rational man. He didn't chase the myths of youth or believe in miracles. But when he started noticing how his body responded to care, he began to wonder, maybe aging isn't as inevitable as it seems. For many years, he had viewed fatigue, sluggishness, and the waning of interest in life as the natural course of aging. But one day, while speaking with a doctor, he heard something for the first time. Did you know your energy is directly tied to your testosterone levels? He had heard the word before, but never paid much attention. Now, he was intrigued. It turns out that testosterone isn't just about sexual drive. It's essential for everyday things: confidence, focus, even mood and muscle tone. When he asked whether there was a way to support its levels without medication, the doctor replied calmly, "Yes, regular sexual activity, including masturbation, is one of the natural methods." This was a real revelation for Richard. He started noticing that during the weeks when he paid more attention to himself, he felt more energetic. He woke up feeling more refreshed, with a stronger desire to act. This wasn't some mental trick. It was the body at work. And the more consistently he nurtured this process, the more tangible the results became. But then another topic caught his attention: prostate health. At a urologist appointment, which he scheduled due to some mild discomfort, he learned that as men age, the absence of regular ejaculation can cause fluids to build up in the prostate. This stagnation can lead to inflammation, discomfort, and even an increased risk of tumor development. Once again, the solution was simple: regular ejaculation. Richard was surprised by how logical and natural it all sounded. This wasn't indulgence. It was hygiene. It was a way to care for an organ that had served him faithfully for decades. He read about a large Harvard study which found that men who ejaculated more than 21 times a month had a 33% lower risk of developing prostate cancer, a statistic more convincing than any speech. And finally, the heart. Those quiet moments of self-care were reducing his internal tension. His blood pressure was more stable, his pulse calmer, even his breathing deeper. It wasn't magic. It was a system. Simple, bodily, but vitally important. When Richard realized how his intimate actions were connected to hormone levels, prostate function, and heart health, he understood. His well-being wasn't random. It was his choice. And now, he knew how to support it. One evening, Richard sat by the window for a long time, watching as the soft blue light of dusk settled over the street. He felt calm, but in that quiet, he suddenly sensed how lonely a person could feel within familiar walls. The house was in order, his health was under control, the fridge was full. But something inside him echoed with emptiness. Not loudly, not sharply, more like a faint draft. He realized it wasn't about someone being absent. It was about The fact that he hadn't felt close to himself in a long time. Loneliness isn't always the absence of people. Sometimes it's the loss of connection with oneself, with the body, with emotions. When intimate life fades away, a man can stop feeling fully alive. He might still go to the store, watch the news, even laugh with friends. But deep inside, there's silence. It doesn't come all at once. At first, there's just less desire to go out. Then, less urge to call anyone. Eventually, less capacity to feel. Emotions become dulled, losing their vibrancy and depth. That's exactly how it had been for Richard. Until the moment he let himself reconnect. Not out of boredom or habit, but with respect. With a wish not for physical pleasure, but for emotional warmth. He didn't set goals, didn't expect immediate results. He was simply present with himself. And that became the beginning of his return. He thought of his neighbor, Mr. Walsh, who had recently turned 81. Once a cheerful, vibrant man who always told jokes and was the first to invite everyone over for a barbecue, Walsh had grown withdrawn and sad in recent months. One day, they had a quiet conversation, and Richard carefully shared some of his thoughts. Walsh listened. A couple of weeks later, he came up to Richard and said, "You know, I tried it, without shame, without expectations, just as an act of care, and I felt the warmth coming back." He started smiling more, became softer, more open. Even his eyes looked brighter. Intimate connection with oneself isn't about lust. It's not, just a habit. It's a way to come back to life, to restore emotional fluidity, the ability to feel joy and even sadness with real depth. Because emotions, too, are part of health. When you deny yourself sensuality, you suppress your feelings. But when you restore touch, you restore yourself. Richard understood. It all starts with honesty. Not with the world, not with the past, but with yourself. And if you allow yourself to feel truly alive, even in the quiet of your own bedroom, life will always answer back.